Hi, I'm Elizabeth Dickinson, and I'm running to be St. Paul's first Green Mayor and first female mayor. You've got a lot of questions, but I think I'm going to start with a base level issue for me, which is 15 now. I believe that raising the minimum wage to $15 over the next 4 to 7 years is the single most important thing that I can do from an economic standpoint and from an equity standpoint. It's estimated that doing so will raise 68,000 individuals out of poverty. And given that St. Paul has nearly a quarter of its residents living at 100% of poverty and nearly 45% living at 175% of poverty, this is a situation that is urgent and needs to be addressed immediately. So I am a big supporter of that, with the protection for small business of a longer lead-in time. We're really talking about just raising the minimum wage 75 cents an hour for the next 4 to 7 years. So after that, the other things that I think can help business would be to have small business navigators at the city. The city of Minneapolis has started this, and I believe if we have multilingual business navigators to help small businesses know where they start in the process of starting a business, what departments they talk to, what forms they need to fill out, and having somebody who can hold their hands through the process is absolutely essential to creating a good small business climate. I also believe in the principles of lean urbanism. That is the idea that there are a lot of unnecessary or hampering regulations and red tape. And lean urbanism believes that you can pink those, you can make them less onerous. There's actually a pilot project over on the east side on Payne Avenue, and I will be very interested to see what they learn, both from working with new businesses as well as established businesses, and seeing what things we can learn from them that we can now extrapolate and apply to the whole city. I also believe that there are groups that are already doing this work that we need to support. So there are groups like the Eastside Enterprise Center, which I have visited, which has educational groups, support groups, economic literacy groups for virtually every immigrant group and group of color that you can imagine. And they do the real hard work of going sometimes door to door to try and help people figure out what it is they need to be more successful as a business. I also have to give a shout out to the Neighborhood Development Center, which also works with immigrant businesses and people of color to develop businesses, and they provide working capital of up to about $250,000 for certain qualified businesses. And also the Latino Economic Development Center in Minneapolis, which also comes over and does some work here. By working with those businesses, I think that we become much more successful as a city. In terms of small and medium manufacturing, I believe we should work with Enterprise Minnesota, which specializes in working with those groups, and Grow Minnesota, which has about 70 economic entities and people that work on development management training needs for all of those entities. In terms of clusters and growing business clusters in all of the different areas that you've mentioned, I believe that we should work through the St. Paul Port Authority and their 22 business centers. One of the things that I've learned from talking with Lee Kruger, who's the head of the St. Paul Port Authority, is that one of the things that we can use to market ourselves is really how connected we are by barge and by rail and by our highways. Especially with the North Harbor closing in Minneapolis, there are a lot of businesses that are looking to potentially come over the river to be part of the St. Paul business community. Because if you are able to move more of your product, you are able to be more profitable and you are able to hire more people. So if you want to grow jobs, that's something that we really need to market. In terms of specific jobs and helping communities of color and disadvantaged folks, I think we can do no better than to look at Dr. Bruce Corey's work, where he's identified the top 10 in-demand jobs in the Twin Cities. And number one on that list is nursing. So one of the things I'd like to do is to work with the Minnesota Nurses Association. And when I screened with them, I actually asked them about what kind of outreach they were doing to communities of color. And they were just starting to get some programs going. I think by working with them and also working with the International Institute of Minnesota, which does a lot of training, especially with helping people get out of the nursing assistants and personal care assistant jobs and giving them pathways into higher medical jobs like nursing. I think partnering with them can really help. Also with Jewish Community Action, which offers some similar programs. And I think in general, we need to make kids more aware of the building and trades. We've really devalued work with people's hands, and there's a great shortage of welders. I think we need to work with the St. Paul technical colleges and linking them into some of the high demand industries that are looking for workers. There are a lot of certification programs where you can go for a few months, get a certification, and you come out with a living wage job, like welding, like metal sheet fabrication. And I think by pushing those jobs, not everybody needs or wants to go to college, that we can also address the poverty issue. In terms of housing, you don't actually have a specific question about that, but in terms of growing real economic assets in under-resourced communities, we need to make a commitment as a city to really enforcing that every development that uses city money contains 20% affordable housing. And as a subsection of that, we need to also make sure that there's some housing that is specifically targeted for those at 30% of the average mean income, because those are the people that are most vulnerable, the disabled, the mentally ill, and just people who just don't have enough money to afford a market rate apartment. I think there are other programs like the Rondo Land Trust, which helps get families into single family homes. And they do that by actually owning the land. So the people own the houses and they build equity through that, but they don't own the land. And so that means the Rondo Land Trust keeps it affordable because they pay the property taxes for them. Programs like that we need to invest in. In terms of education, as you're probably well aware, the education budget and the city budget are two actually separate budgets. But one of the things that a mayor can do is to make sure that after-school programs at the parks and rec centers and at the libraries are fully funded, because those are supportive of kids' academic, emotional, personal development. There's also a program I'd like to do a really big expansion on, and that's the Right Track program. Kathy Coram, who runs it, tells me that last year 1,200 kids applied for 500 summer jobs. And those summer jobs are not just in Parks and Rec, but they're also in industry and business. And I would love to do much more outreach to businesses to try and bring them into the fold, because the kids who go through the Right Track program generally end up with better attendance at school, better grades, better graduation rates. And I even door knocked someone whose daughter is now going to go on to college because she sees a pathway and she sees a job that she wants to do that will require a college education to do it. So I'm a big supporter of that. You also asked about sustainability. One of the projects that I've worked on through Community Power Minnesota is something called inclusive financing. And that allows low-income renters to be able to upgrade their apartments without going through the landlord and without a credit check, and being able to pay for it on their bill. And it's something that's worked really well in the South, and it saves people money, and it's something that I think we should invest in as part of our climate action plan. Inclusive financing can also be used for community solar gardens, and that is where the community puts up solar on the roof of a school or a church, and you can sell subscriptions to people in the neighborhood and actually save the money and also save the environment. So that's something I really support. I also think that there's a lot that we could do to make St. Paul the renewable energy capital of the upper Midwest. The whole renewable energy industry is growing 12 times faster than any other industry. Al Gore says it's growing 17 times faster. And I would like to partner with the St. Paul Port Authority to try and bring in more solar and wind installers and developers. There's a lot of industrial land that's over on the east side where there are high concentrations of poverty, and I know you asked about where there are high concentrations of poverty. Where Whirlpool has left, where 3M has left, and I just see great opportunity there. In the Star Trib today, they've talked about the renewable energy jobs. They actually have a headline that says the sky's the limit on them. And again, these are jobs that you can get certified. A wind turbine technician can be certified in 2 years and be making $50,000 a year. Those are living wage jobs that we should be encouraging our population to look at and providing opportunities to do so. Finally, I would talk about this handy dandy thing, the Equitable Development Principles and Scorecard. This is a way of looking at every kind of development that comes in to see if it's going to be transit friendly, to see if it's going to be employing people of color, if it's going to be equitable for all of our neighborhoods. And I believe that we should use this to evaluate all the development that we do in the city. And so that is it for me. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more details, especially about my Solar on the Schools program, which I haven't gone into, please go to elizabethdickinson.org. And thank you for listening. And please vote me your #1 choice on November 7th. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.